Some doors open to places that change everything. Sometimes life offers us chances that feel real and important, but we hesitate to take them. The story The Door in the Wall by H.G. Wells shows us how those moments shape who we are. It reminds us that the choices we make about what to follow or ignore can define a lifetime. This story is about seeing what truly matters and having the courage to step through. It invites us to listen to the quiet voice inside that calls us toward meaning and peace. It challenges us to not let fear or doubt keep us from what could be our greatest chance. If you're ready to discover how a simple door can hold the key to your own life's turning point and find the strength to open it, then let's dive in. Chapter 1. A Childhood Memory That Never Let Go. You know, sometimes there's a memory from childhood that stays with you. Not because it was loud or full of drama, but because it whispered something honest to your heart. It showed you something that felt more real than the world around you. And once you see that, really see it, you can't unsee it. That's what The Door in the Wall is about. A man, Lionel Wallace, who as a child discovered a strange green door in a white wall, and behind that door he found peace. He found joy. He found a world that felt like home. Not just any home, but the kind of place your soul recognizes even before your mind does. He was just a boy, but that moment, that experience, shaped everything he became. It was beautiful, it was unforgettable, and it haunted him, because once he left it, he never found his way back in the same way again. And that's where many people are today. See, this isn't just a story from a book. This is about you. This is about all of us. We've all had that moment. Maybe it was a dream, a feeling, a time when we felt fully alive and connected to something pure. Maybe it was when we were young and the world hadn't told us what to be yet. Maybe it was a time we believed anything was possible. We had our own door, but life got busy. Responsibilities piled up. People started telling us what mattered and what didn't. We started chasing what they said we should want, and somewhere along the line, we lost sight of our door. Lionel Wallace never stopped remembering his door. No matter how much success he had, no matter how high he climbed in the world, that memory stayed with him. And here's the hard truth. When you've touched something real, something meaningful, it never really lets go of you. You can bury it, you can ignore it, but it's always there. Quiet. Still. Waiting. Now think about this. What if the memory you keep pushing away is actually the most important clue you have? What if that moment, from your childhood, the one you can't explain, the one you keep replaying, isn't just nostalgia? What if it's direction, a reminder of what you were meant to become before the noise of the world got in? There's something powerful about a child's mind. They haven't learned to lie to themselves yet. They haven't learned to doubt their joy. When Wallace found that door, he didn't ask questions. He didn't think about status or career or image. He just walked in. Because children don't hesitate to follow wonder. They trust what they feel, and we forget how to do that. But it's still in you. That version of you that used to dream, the one that felt things deeply and imagined a bigger life, that's not gone. It's just quiet. Waiting for you to stop long enough to listen again, waiting for you to open your eyes to what really matters, because the world will try to convince you to chase what's shiny, but it's the quiet moments, the ones that stir your heart, that are worth chasing. Lionel's memory of the green door wasn't about fantasy. It was about truth. It was about the part of him that knew there was more than routines and checklists. He became a successful man, respected, important, but none of that gave him peace. None of that filled the space that only that door once touched. And you have to ask yourself, how much of your life is built around things that look good on the outside, but feel hollow on the inside? We live in a world that's quick to reward performance, but slow to reward presence. We forget that success without meaning isn't really success, it's just motion. The memory Lionel held onto, that door, wasn't just something nice to think about. It was his compass. It reminded him of who he really was, and when he ignored it, when he got caught up in the demands of the world, something in him always knew he was drifting. So ask yourself, what's your green door? What moment in your life reminds you of truth, of peace, of joy that didn't need approval or applause? Maybe it was a walk in nature, a childhood moment when you felt completely safe. Maybe it was something you loved doing before you were told to be realistic. That's not weakness. That's not childish. That's your soul remembering. And when you remember something that deeply, it's not just memory, it's calling. But here's the challenge. It's easy to get distracted. Wallace had responsibilities, titles, people to impress, and every time he saw the door again later in life, something held him back. He wanted to go in, but he told himself it wasn't the right time, that he'd get to it later, that he couldn't afford to stop now. And each time he passed it up, the pain grew a little stronger. How many times have you done that? You get a chance to do something that matters, something that speaks to you, but the timing isn't perfect. You've got a meeting, you've got bills, you've got people who wouldn't understand. And so you tell yourself, I'll do it later. But later turns into years, and years turn into regret. This story, this chapter of Wallace's life, it's not a warning about fantasy, it's a warning about forgetting, about letting the noise of the world drown out the voice inside you. The longer you ignore that voice, the harder it becomes to hear. But it never fully leaves. If you can still remember something from childhood that made you feel alive, you are not lost. If something inside you still aches when you think of what could have been, you are not too far gone. That ache is proof that there's something in you that wants more than comfort. It wants meaning. It wants truth. That's not weakness. That's your strength trying to wake you up. You don't have to run away from responsibility to reconnect with what matters. You don't have to throw everything away, but you do have to listen. You have to make space for what's real, because at the end of your life it won't be the trophies or the status that matter. It'll be the moments when you felt alive, the moments when you were connected to your purpose, the moments when you walked through the door and felt at peace. Wallace didn't ignore the memory because he didn't care. He ignored it because he was scared, scared of what it meant, scared of what he might lose. But the truth is, he lost more by staying away than he ever would have by going back in. So today, remember your door, that place, that memory, that version of you that felt whole. Don't brush it off. Don't wait for the perfect time. There is no perfect time. There is only now. The door may not look the same. The path may not be clear. But if you feel it calling, follow it, because the most powerful thing you can do in this life is to return to who you really are. Chapter 2. The strange door that felt too real. When Lionel Wallace first stood in front of that strange green door, something inside him stirred. He was just a boy, out wandering the streets. But this wasn't just another wall, or just another street corner. Something about that door didn't feel made up. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. So real, it unsettled him. The paint was chipped, but the green stood out in a way that pulled at his eyes. It didn't shout for attention. It didn't demand anything. It just waited, calm, still, almost quiet. And in that quietness, there was something powerful, something that called him in a way nothing else had. We've all had moments that didn't make sense at the time, moments we couldn't explain, but we felt them. You walk by something, you meet someone, you see a place, and something in you just knows it's different. You feel it before you think about it. That's what happened to Wallace. That door didn't fit with the street around it. It felt like it didn't belong to the world he knew. And that's what made it matter, because somewhere deep inside, he felt like maybe he didn't belong to the world he knew either. And in that second, as he stared at the door, everything else faded. The city, the sound, the rush of the world, it all slowed down. For the first time in his life he felt still. Not stuck, not lost, just still. And in that stillness he felt something people don't talk about often. The sense that you're exactly where you need to be, even if you can't explain why. When he opened that door, it didn't lead to a street or a room. It led to something more. What he found on the other side wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, gentle. It was a place that knew him. The colors were softer. The light had warmth. The people there looked at him not with curiosity, but recognition. They didn't ask him questions. They didn't need him to prove anything. It was like they already knew who he was. And in that space, he didn't need to pretend or perform. He just existed, and that was enough. You have to understand what that means to a child or to anyone really. In a world where we are always told to do more, be more, act a certain way, reach a certain level, it's rare to find a place where you're accepted simply as you are. But that's what Wallace felt there. For a few moments he wasn't trying to keep up or stand out. He was just, and freedom like that, it changes you. That memory of the strange door became the thread that ran through Wallace's entire life. Even as he grew older, even as life got louder and more demanding, he could never forget how that place made him feel. It wasn't just a childhood fantasy, it was too vivid for that, too grounded, too alive. He remembered the soft laughter, the warmth in the air, the peace in every step. He remembered the way the world behind that door made sense in a way nothing else ever had. But the hardest part was this: he never knew when or if he'd find that door again, because the world outside that door kept moving. It didn't stop to make space for wonder. It didn't make room for questions. It couldn't answer, and so he kept the memory close but hidden. He didn't speak of it often, because most people wouldn't understand, and maybe that's the hardest part of growing up, knowing something is real to you, but feeling like you have to protect it from people who might laugh or call it childish. Still, the memory never lost its power. Every now and then Wallace would catch sight of that same green door again. Sometimes it was in a dream, sometimes it was in real life, out of the corner of his eye, on a street that looked almost the same. And each time he hesitated, he'd stop, he'd feel the pull. But he didn't always walk through. Sometimes he convinced himself he didn't have time. Other times he told himself it might not be the same door, and sometimes he just froze. Because going back through that door meant facing who he really was. It meant letting go of the identity the world had built for him. And maybe that's what we're really afraid of, not the unknown, but the truth. The truth of what we actually want. The truth of who we are when no one's watching. Because deep down, we all have a door like that, a door that felt too real to be ignored. A moment, a place, a feeling that stays with us even when everything else changes. And sometimes we don't walk through because we're scared of what it'll cost, but we don't stop to think about what it's costing us to stay away. Wallace kept moving forward in life. He became respected, important. On the outside, people admired him. But on the inside, he carried that ache, the ache of something unfinished. Not a regret exactly, but a longing. A quiet knowing that there was more. Not more in terms of success or praise, but more in terms of meaning, more in terms of alignment, that deep, inner sense that you're living the life that was actually meant for you. And here's where we need to stop and ask, what's the door you're standing in front of? What part of your life feels too real to ignore? What moment have you been pushing away because it doesn't fit with everything else you've built? You might think it's too late to go back, that too much has happened, that you've moved on. But if the memory is still alive in you, that means it's still calling. And that matters. Because the most meaningful parts of your life aren't always the ones that make sense. They're the ones that make you feel something deep, the ones that shake you awake. Wallace's story isn't just about childhood, it's about courage. The courage to believe in the things that feel true even when no one else sees them. The courage to trust your inner voice when everything outside is telling you to be practical. And maybe most of all, the courage to return to the places, the dreams and the truth that made you feel alive before the world told you who you had to be. That door wasn't strange because it was imagined. It was strange because it revealed something real in a world that often feels false. And when something feels that real, you don't owe it an explanation. You owe it attention. Chapter 3. Why we ignore what really matters. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The way we often turn away from the very things that once gave us meaning. The moments that stirred something deep inside us, the people, the ideas, the experiences that made us feel truly alive. We remember them. They linger in our minds. They visit us in quiet moments, often uninvited, yet never unwelcome. And still we look the other way, not because we don't care, but because caring too much would mean changing something. It would mean facing the fact that we might be chasing things that don't matter as much as we thought. People don't ignore what matters because they're cold or disconnected. They do it because life has taught them to survive, not to feel. From early on, we're taught to follow the rules, meet the standards, fit the mold. We learn to measure our value in achievements, our worth in recognition. We're told to be realistic, to be practical, to choose what's safe. And slowly, almost without realizing it, we trade in what we love for what looks good on the surface. We replace what's meaningful with what's convenient. That's what Lionel Wallace did. He didn't forget the green door because it meant nothing to him. He pushed it aside because the world told him it didn't belong. He rose through the ranks. He became somebody people respected. But all along he was carrying a quiet conflict inside. Because while others saw his success, he saw what he had left behind. He knew what he had walked away from. And that kind of knowing, no matter how deeply buried, doesn't go away. There's a reason people stay busy. There's a reason we fill our schedules, chase endless goals, constantly look for the next thing. We think it's ambition. We call it progress. But sometimes it's just distraction. Because if we slow down, even for a second, we might have to sit with the questions we've been avoiding. Questions like, is this what I really want? Am I living in a way that feels true? What have I lost along the way? Facing those questions takes more than honesty. It takes courage. Courage to admit that maybe we've been running. Courage to accept that comfort doesn't always mean contentment. We're surrounded by voices telling us to climb higher, get more, move faster, but very few tell us to pause and ask if the ladder we're climbing is leaning against the right wall. Wallace had moments when he saw the door again. Glimpses, unexpected, unplanned, but each time he hesitated, and it wasn't because he didn't want to go in. He did, but he also had a meeting, a task, a responsibility, a reason not to stop. And when you carry the weight of expectations, yours or others, it's hard to turn away from them. Even for something that once gave you life, we ignore what matters because we're afraid of what it might demand from us. Real meaning isn't easy. It asks you to let go of what's safe. It asks you to take risks, to be seen, to be honest. And honesty is uncomfortable. It exposes the gaps between who we are and who we want to be. So we avoid it. We build layers. We keep busy. And the more successful we become in the eyes of others, the more difficult it becomes to admit what we're missing inside. There's also fear, real quiet fear. Fear that if we follow what truly matters, we'll lose what we've built. Fear that we'll disappoint people, that we'll fail, that we'll find out the thing we hoped for isn't what we imagined. But the deeper fear is this: what if we never go back? What if we silence that inner voice so long that it stops speaking? Wallace's door wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of something real, not flashy, not loud, but deeply honest. And every time he passed it up, it hurt. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, gnawing way. Like something small inside him faded just a little more each time. And that's what happens when we ignore what matters. We don't break. We fade, slowly, silently. We lose our spark, bit by bit, while pretending everything's fine. But here's what you need to understand. It's not too late. The moment you stop and really look, really see what you've been pushing away, that's when something powerful happens. You remember what it feels like to care. You remember what it means to feel alive, even if it's been buried under years of noise. And once you feel that again, you can't go back to pretending. The truth is, you don't need to abandon your responsibilities to live a life that matters, but you do need to make space for meaning. You need to be willing to say, I want more than this, not more things, more truth, more purpose, more connection. And that doesn't come from chasing every goal society hands you. It comes from listening to what your heart keeps pointing to, even if it doesn't make sense on paper. People ignore what matters because it's quiet. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't compete. It just waits, patiently, gently. And in that waiting, it hopes you'll stop long enough to hear it again. Because the most important parts of life don't shout, they whisper. Wallace didn't forget his door. He tried. But you can't forget what touches your soul. You can only cover it up for so long before it starts to show through. It shows up in restlessness, in late-night questions, in a subtle sadness that lingers, even in your happiest moments. That's not something to fear. That's something to notice. That's your life trying to speak to you. So don't keep ignoring it. Don't keep chasing things just because everyone else is. Don't keep telling yourself it's too late or too risky. The moment you choose to listen is the moment things begin to change. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to stop running, start noticing, start remembering. Chapter 4: The Pull Between Dreams and Real Life. There's a quiet battle that most people fight, but rarely talk about. It isn't loud. It doesn't always show on the outside, but inside, it wears people down. It's the pull between the life we once imagined and the life we've come to accept. It's the tension between the dreams we carried when we were younger and the routines we now live every day. And for many, that struggle creates a silent kind of sadness, the feeling that something important might have been left behind. Lionel Wallace lived with that pull every single day. He had seen something extraordinary when he was a child, something that felt more real than anything else in his life. That green door and everything it led to wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder of the kind of life that felt full, calm, and deeply personal. But reality didn't stop to wait for wonder. There were expectations, pressures, paths already laid out for him. He had to make choices that made sense to the people around him. So he did what most people do. He pushed his dreams to the side and focused on what the world told him mattered. And yet, even after achieving success, even after building a respected life, the dreams never truly faded. That's the thing about real dreams. They don't disappear. They stay, even if we pretend they don't. They live in the space between our thoughts, In the moments before sleep, in the quiet pauses between distractions, they're there always gently reminding us of the life we once believed in. It's not that Wallace didn't care about the life he built, he cared deeply, but the more he gave to his duties, the more he noticed the distance growing between what he did every day and what he truly longed for. There's a very human conflict in that, being grateful for what you have while still feeling the ache of what you're missing. Most people assume it has to be one or the other, that if you're thankful you shouldn't want anything else, but that's not how the heart works. You can appreciate your life and still feel called to something more, and denying that call doesn't bring peace. It just creates a quiet restlessness. Wallace's dream wasn't about fantasy. It wasn't an escape from reality. It was a vision of a life that felt honest, a life that wasn't rushed or noisy, a life where he didn't have to wear a role or chase approval. That kind of dream touches a part of you that daily life rarely reaches, and when it does, it's hard to forget. But following it, that's where the challenge begins. Because real life is full of reasons to stay where you are. There are bills, deadlines, relationships, expectations, and those things aren't bad. They're just heavy. They make it harder to listen to that small voice inside you saying, "Remember who you were." Most people don't ignore their dreams out of laziness. They do it out of fear. Fear of letting people down, fear of change, fear of not being enough if they step off the path they've always known. And yet, Wallace couldn't silence the pull. Every time he saw that door again, whether in memory, imagination, or reality, it reminded him that he had once known something more, something deeper. And the more time passed, the more he realized that no amount of success could replace the feeling of being where you truly belong. The world trains us to choose safety over truth, to pick what's acceptable over what's fulfilling. And so, year after year, many drift further from their dreams without even noticing. They stay busy, stay efficient, stay successful, but deep down, they feel empty. They lose that sense of being lit up from within. And the further they drift, the harder it becomes to turn back. But Wallace's story shows something important. No matter how far you go, the pull doesn't stop. It waits. It stays with you. It shows up again and again, until you're ready to pay attention. And when you do, something powerful happens. You remember that you have a choice. That maybe your life doesn't have to be divided between dreams and duty. Maybe there's a way to live with both, not perfectly balanced but honestly held. You don't have to quit everything or change your world overnight to follow what matters, but you do have to stop running from it. You have to start making space for what makes you feel alive. Maybe it's 10 minutes a day. Maybe it's one small decision. Maybe it's just being honest with yourself about what you truly want. That honesty alone can change everything. The pull between dreams and real life isn't a weakness. It's a sign that your heart is still awake, that you haven't gone numb, that you're still connected to something real inside you. It means you still care, and caring is where all meaningful change begins. Wallace didn't ignore the dream because he didn't believe in it. He ignored it because life had trained him to believe he didn't have time for it, that it didn't fit into his role, his image, his responsibilities. But the truth is, what doesn't fit often matters the most. The dreams that don't fit your current life are probably the ones trying to lead you to a better one. Sometimes people wait for a perfect moment to return to what matters, but that moment rarely comes. Life doesn't stop for clarity. It keeps moving. So if you're feeling the pull, if there's something inside you saying, "This isn't all there is," listen to it. Don't dismiss it as foolish. Don't label it as impossible. Give it space. Let it speak. Let it guide you back to something that feels whole. You were not made to live a life that looks good but feels hollow. You were made to create, to grow, connect with what's real. And that often means revisiting the dreams you set aside, not to relive the past, but to build a future that includes what your heart has always known. There's strength in that choice, not the kind people praise loudly, but the kind that brings peace, the kind that lets you wake up in the morning and know you're not just existing, you're living. Wallace knew that pull would never go away, and deep down he knew he had to choose. He could keep ignoring it, or he could return to the place that once made him feel fully alive. That decision wasn't easy. It cost something, but in the end he understood something we all need to understand. Real life and real dreams don't have to be enemies. They can live together if you're brave enough to let them. Chapter 5. The cost of always choosing logic over heart. We're often taught to trust logic, to lean on reason, weigh the pros and cons, and choose the path that seems safest. From a young age, we're trained to make decisions based on facts, data, and outcomes we can predict. And in many parts of life that makes sense. You need structure, you need plans. But what we're not always told is what we lose when we choose logic every single time, especially when it silences what we feel deep inside. There's a cost to ignoring the voice of the heart, and for many, that cost builds quietly over time. Lionel Wallace was a man who understood structure. He rose through life by following the rules, making smart moves and staying focused. The world rewarded him for that. But what no one saw was what it was taking from him in return. Every time he chose logic over that persistent memory of the green door, every time he told himself, not now or it doesn't make sense, he gave up something, not just a moment, but a part of himself, a part that remembered how it felt to be whole, a part that knew peace beyond achievement. This isn't about logic being wrong. It has its place, but it's about what happens when it becomes your only compass. Because logic is based on what you already know. It uses what's proven, what's safe, what's accepted. But your heart, it often points you toward what's unknown, what you haven't done yet, what doesn't have guarantees. And while that feels risky, it's also where the real meaningful parts of life begin. When Wallace looked back on his life, it wasn't the logical decisions that haunted him. It was the times he felt something deeply and turned away from it. Times when he saw the door again and told himself he didn't have time, that it could wait, that the practical thing was to keep walking. And yet, those decisions, reasonable as they were, left a quiet ache behind. Because choosing what makes sense at the expense of what feels right doesn't bring you closer to yourself. It pulls you further away. People often say, follow your heart, as if it's easy, but in reality, it takes strength, it takes self-trust, and it takes a willingness to disappoint others or step off a familiar path. That's why many don't do it. They tell themselves they'll listen later, once things are more stable. But later doesn't always come. Life fills with noise, more responsibilities, more pressure. And the heart's voice, once clear, starts to fade under the weight of all the things that seemed more important. But it never fully disappears. That's the thing. The heart doesn't forget what matters. It remembers, even if you try to shut it down, even if you bury it under achievements and schedules. That quiet knowing waits, and it waits with patience most people don't realize until it's too late. When Wallace reached the end of his story, he wasn't broken because of one bad choice. He was exhausted from years of small decisions that chipped away at what made him feel alive. It's easy to look successful. It's harder to feel fulfilled, and the difference often lies in what you're willing to listen to. Are you making choices based on who you really are, or just based on what others expect? Are you following the life you built on paper, or the one that still lives in your heart? When you always choose logic, you rarely take chances. You don't pause for the things that don't come with immediate rewards. You skip the slow moments, the detours, the dreams that can't be explained in bullet points, and yet those are the things that often carry the most meaning. The soft, unexpected moments. The quiet passions, the things that stir your spirit when no one else is watching. That's what the heart remembers. And if you go too long without listening, you start to forget what it feels like to really be you. That's the real cost. Not losing time, but losing touch. Losing the parts of yourself that only come alive when you stop trying to make everything make sense. Wallace could have opened that door again. He had the chance. More than once, but every time, logic stepped in. It told him what he stood to lose. What didn't fit, what wasn't guaranteed. And so, he kept walking, kept working, kept achieving. And all the while something in him was slipping away. Many people reach a point where they realize they've built a life that's full but not rich. They have everything they're supposed to want, but it doesn't feel complete. And that gap, the space between what you have and what you long for, that's where the voice of the heart lives. That's where your real life is waiting. But choosing it means letting go of the need for certainty. It means trusting what you feel, even if you can't prove it. It means believing in something you can't always explain. That's not reckless, that's real courage. Because the people who create lives of meaning aren't the ones who always play it safe. They're the ones who dare to say, this may not make sense to others, but it makes sense to me. The truth is, no one else can tell you what matters most. No one else can define your peace, your joy, your direction. That's something only you can know. But to access that, you have to be willing to feel again. To slow down, to turn inward, and to honor what your heart's been trying to tell you all along. Wallace's story is powerful because it's honest. He didn't live a bad life. He just lived a life that missed something important, something that logic couldn't replace. And in the end, what he remembered wasn't the moments that looked good to others. It was the moments he let pass by because they didn't fit into his plan. You don't have to choose between reason and feeling. But you do have to give both a seat at the table, because when you listen to only one, the other becomes your silence. And it's in that silence where dreams fade, joy dulls, and life becomes something you manage instead of something you live. So ask yourself, when was the last time you truly listened to your heart, not for what's safe, but for what's true? When did you last make a decision that honored who you are, not just what was expected? You don't have to abandon your responsibilities to live with heart, but you do have to stop pretending that logic alone will make you whole. You are more than what's reasonable. You are more than what's expected. You are here to feel deeply, to live honestly, and to follow what makes you come alive, even if no one else understands it. Because at the end of it all, the only life worth living is the one that feels like yours. And that life begins the moment you choose heart over habit, truth over safety, meaning over comfort, not once, not someday, but now. Chapter 6. How Society Teaches Us to Doubt Wonder. When we're young, we see the world through open eyes. We don't question beauty, we don't overthink joy, and we certainly don't hold back from curiosity. A simple shape in the clouds, a question without an answer, or a moment of stillness, all of it feels alive. That's wonder. It's not something we learn. It's something we're born with. It comes naturally, before fear, before doubt, before the need to explain everything. But something happens as we grow. Slowly, almost without noticing, we're taught to step away from that instinct, to distrust what can't be measured, to turn away from the things that make us feel instead of think. And that shift doesn't happen in one moment. It happens over time, one subtle message after another. Society doesn't come out and say don't believe in wonder. It does something quieter. It tells us to grow up, to stop dreaming, to be serious. It rewards certainty and punishes imagination. It celebrates answers and dismisses questions that don't lead to a clear result. And if you're not careful, you start to absorb all of that. You start to believe that what can't be proven must not be real. You begin to think that if something can't be explained in a spreadsheet or a step-by-step plan, it's a distraction. That's what happened to Lionel Wallace. He was just a child when he found that green door. He didn't need anyone to tell him it was special. He felt it. That experience touched something in him that the rest of the world never could. But as he grew older, he began to hear the same things many of us hear. Be practical, stay focused, don't get lost in fantasy. And even though he never stopped remembering the door, he started questioning whether it had any place in the life he was building. And that's how it begins. Not with rejection, but with doubt. A slow drip of voices telling us to be realistic, to prioritize logic, to follow the path everyone else is on. And the more we follow it, the more we disconnect from the part of ourselves that once saw the world with open wonder. Not because it disappeared, but because we were taught not to trust it. We live in a world that values proof, metrics, clear, defined outcomes. And there's value in that. Yes. But when that becomes the only way we decide what's worth our time, we lose something precious. We stop listening to the moments that can't be measured, the moments that whisper instead of shout, the moments that stir our hearts for no reason at all. Wallace's memory of the door wasn't just about escape, it was about truth. A truth that didn't fit into the expectations around him. And because it didn't fit, he was expected to put it aside. That's how society shapes us, not with force, but with pressure. The pressure to conform, to pursue what's recognized, what's approved, what's rewarded. Children don't need permission to feel wonder. They don't wait to be told when it's okay to imagine. But somewhere along the way, we're told to stop asking questions without answers. We're taught to sit still, follow directions, stay inside the lines. And those lessons don't just change our actions, they reshape how we see the world. Eventually we start to believe that wonder is childish, that awe belongs to fairy tales, that mystery is something to solve, not experience. And we trade the ability to be moved by life for the ability to control it. We become so focused on managing everything that we forget what it feels like to be surprised. Not by something big, but by something simple. A quiet moment, a memory, a glimpse of something that doesn't quite make sense but feels right anyway. That's what Wallace lost, not because he wanted to, but because the world told him to. And every time he remembered that door, it wasn't just about a place, it was about a feeling he couldn't recreate in his daily life, no matter how successful he became. That feeling didn't come from strategy, it came from presence, from the willingness to be moved by something you didn't expect. But wonder doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It waits, it stays quiet. It lives in the spaces between our distractions, the moments when we're not looking at our screens or chasing the next milestone. It shows up in the memories we can't shake, the emotions we can't name, the sense that there must be more than this routine. And the tragedy isn't that we lose the door, it's that we start to believe it never existed. That's what society can do when we don't question it. It replaces wonder with noise, and we start to measure everything by how useful it is instead of how true it feels. But usefulness isn't the only measure of value. Some things are valuable simply because they connect us to what's real, to what's soft and quiet and honest. And those are the things that often get lost when we only do what we're told. When we stop trusting ourselves, when we let the world decide what's worth our attention. The truth is, you don't outgrow wonder, you unlearn it. And what's unlearned can be remembered, but to remember you have to slow down. You have to be willing to sit with the parts of yourself that don't fit neatly into your schedule. You have to let go of the need to explain everything, because some of the most meaningful things in life don't come with instructions. They come as feelings, as moments, as memories that feel more real than the world in front of you. Wallace didn't ignore the door because he stopped believing in it. He ignored it because the world convinced him it didn't matter. But deep down, he always knew it did. And that knowing, that quiet, persistent knowing, that's what we all carry. Even when we bury it, even when we pretend it's not there. So the question isn't whether wonder still exists. It does. It always will. The question is whether we're willing to see it again. Whether we're willing to trust what we feel instead of just what we can prove. Whether we're brave enough to admit that sometimes the things that move us the most are the things we can't explain. You don't have to give up structure to believe in something deeper. You just have to stop letting structure be the only thing that guides you. Wonder isn't weakness, it's strength, the kind that doesn't need applause or permission. The kind that reminds you who you were before the world told you what to become. Chapter 7. The Pain of Missing Your True Calling. There's a kind of pain that doesn't show up all at once. It grows slowly. It doesn't come from an accident or an obvious loss. It comes from something quieter, from the steady distance between the life you're living and the one you were meant to live. It's the ache of knowing there was something more, something deeper, something truer you were supposed to do, but you didn't. Maybe you got busy. Maybe you got scared. Maybe the noise of life got too loud. Whatever the reason, you kept moving forward, but part of you stayed behind. That's what happened to Lionel Wallace. He had a glimpse of something real early in his life. He felt it. He knew it. That door, and everything it held, wasn't just beautiful. It was right. It felt like home. But life doesn't always give us room to chase what feels right. It gives us rules, responsibilities, expectations, and Wallace, like so many people, did what was expected. He built a life. He worked hard. He did well. And yet, even as others praised him, there was something inside him that felt unfinished. You can follow the rules and still feel lost. You can be successful and still feel empty. Because calling isn't about what looks good to the world, it's about what feels aligned with your soul. It's not always the loudest thing. Sometimes it's a quiet pull, a repeated thought, a place or a memory that keeps showing up in your heart. It's easy to ignore at first, but the more you walk away from it, the more it begins to hurt. Not like a wound you can see, but like a weight you carry with you. Missing your true calling doesn't happen in one moment. It happens over time. Every time you say not now, every time you convince yourself it's too late, every time you silence the voice inside you that knows better. That's when the distance grows, and over the years that distance turns into regret. Not because you didn't try hard enough in life, but because you didn't listen to what really mattered. You listened to the world. You followed the script. But the story wasn't yours. Wallace never stopped remembering the door, even when he was busy, even when he was respected, even when he was achieving everything people told him he should want. He never stopped thinking about that place behind the door, the peace, the stillness, the feeling of being truly himself. And each time he saw the door again, each time life gave him another chance, he hesitated. He thought of the risks. He told himself there was still time, and then he moved on. Again. But the thing about callings is that they're not about logic. They're about truth. And when you turn your back on truth, long enough it starts to turn its back on you, not out of punishment, but because the connection fades. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to hear that voice again. And one day, you wake up and realize that the version of yourself that once believed in something more has gone quiet, not because you lost it, but because you stopped feeding it. And then the pain begins. Not a sharp pain, but a dull, constant ache, a question that lives at the edge of your thoughts. What if I had listened? What if I had followed that instinct? What if I had opened the door when I had the chance? That's the kind of pain Wallace carried. The pain of knowing, not guessing, not wondering, knowing he knew what he left behind. He knew what was waiting for him. And that's what made it hurt. Because he didn't miss his calling, because he never found it. He missed it because he recognized it and still walked away. So many people live with that same ache. They look fine on the outside. They smile, they keep going, but inside, they're haunted by the life they didn't live, the love they didn't fight for, the idea they didn't pursue, the path they were too afraid to take. It's not failure that haunts them, it's hesitation. It's the moments they stood at the edge of something real and talked themselves out of it. We think calling is about talent, or destiny, or chance, but really it's about choice. It's about what you're willing to move toward, even when it doesn't make sense. It's about trusting the feeling more than the facts, because your heart will recognize what your mind doesn't understand yet. It will lead you to what matters if you're willing to follow it. The problem is, the longer you ignore that calling, the more your life fills with things that don't fit, and those things become walls. Walls of responsibility, of comfort, of identity, and by the time you want to turn back, you feel trapped. Not because there's no way out, but because you've convinced yourself there isn't. That's why Wallace's story hits so deeply. It's not about regret in the traditional sense. It's about slow loss. The kind of loss that happens when you let life move you away from yourself. It's about the pain of looking back and realizing you were so close to something beautiful and you walked past it. But this isn't just a warning, it's a wake-up call. Because pain like that doesn't have to last forever. It can turn into something powerful. If you let it, that pain can become a guide, a reminder, a signal that something in you is still alive, still calling, still hoping you'll listen. And if you're brave enough to listen now, no matter how much time has passed, you can begin again. The truth is, your calling doesn't need you to be perfect, it just needs you to be honest. Honest about what you feel, honest about what you want, honest about what you've been avoiding. And if you can do that, if you can finally stop running from the voice you've heard all along, you'll find that it's still there, waiting. Not with judgment, but with quiet love. You don't have to miss your calling forever, but you do have to stop making excuses. You do have to start taking small steps toward what feels true, even if it's uncertain, even if it's messy, even if it scares you. Because nothing hurts more than staying safe and realizing you lost what made you feel alive. Wallace had a chance. He had many chances, and in the end he knew exactly what he had missed. Not an opportunity, but himself. The version of himself that believed and felt and knew without needing to explain. So the question is not, do you have a calling? You do. The question is, will you listen this time? Do you trust that feeling, even if no one else sees it? Will you open the door, not because it makes sense, but because it matters? Because in the end, the only thing worse than missing your calling is never giving yourself the chance to answer it. Chapter 8. Regret hits harder when time runs out. There's a truth many people carry deep inside, but try hard to avoid facing. It's the awareness that time is not unlimited. It doesn't stretch forever. It keeps moving whether we're ready or not. And when we keep putting things off, when we keep waiting for the right moment, we often assume we'll always have more time, more chances, more someday. But the hardest lesson comes when we realize that someday never came, that time moved forward while we stood still, that the moment we thought would return didn't, and regret, real, sharp, undeniable regret, hits hardest, not in the middle of life, but at the end of it, when it's too late to do anything about what you missed. Lionel Wallace spent his life chasing what the world told him mattered: respect, accomplishment, recognition, and he got all of it. People looked at him and saw success, but inside he was still holding on to something else, a memory, a moment, a door that represented something deeper, something real. And every time he chose the practical path, every time he ignored that quiet pull in his heart, he told himself he was doing the right thing, that he'd get back to it later, that there would be time. But time doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for clarity or comfort. It doesn't adjust itself around our fears or our doubts. It keeps going, quietly, relentlessly. And we often don't feel its weight until it's almost gone. That's when everything we pushed aside starts rising to the surface. That's when the choices we thought were harmless begin to hurt, and the door, the one we saw so many times but didn't open, feels further away than ever. Regret isn't just sadness. It's a deep awareness that we had a chance to live fully and didn't take it. It's not about failure. It's about avoidance. The moments we avoided a hard conversation, the chances we avoided because they were uncomfortable, the passions we buried because they didn't fit the plan. We like to think we'll go back for them, but time has a way of moving us forward in ways we can't undo. Wallace didn't regret his efforts. He regretted what he ignored. He didn't look back and wish he had worked more or impressed more people. He looked back and wished he had listened, himself, to that part of him that remembered what it felt like to be present, to be peaceful, to be whole. The green door wasn't just a memory, it was a reminder of a version of himself that still believed life could be different. But each time he passed it up, the cost grew. Not all at once. It was subtle. A dull ache in the background. A feeling that something was missing, and by the time he could no longer ignore it, the opportunities were slipping away. Not because they vanished, but because his time to choose was running out. And that's what makes regret so heavy. It's not just about the past, it's about the realization that the future you wanted is no longer possible. We live with this idea that we'll get around to the important things later. That right now we need to focus, sacrifice, follow the path. And yes, there's value in discipline, but when discipline becomes a way to ignore your own heart, it turns into distance. Distance from your own life, from your own truth, from your own. The world rarely tells you to stop and listen to yourself. It tells you to keep moving, keep building, keep producing. And before you know it, you've built a life that looks full but feels empty. And by the time you slow down enough to see it clearly, years have passed, people have changed, you've changed. And what once felt close now feels out of reach. That's why regret is so painful. It holds up a mirror and says, this is what you could have had if you had been brave enough. And that's a hard thing to face, because no success, no approval, no reward can undo the pain of realizing you never really gave yourself the life you needed. Wallace remembered the door until the end. He remembered the light, the silence, the warmth. He remembered the sense of belonging he couldn't find anywhere else. But remembering it wasn't enough. Because a memory, no matter how beautiful, can't replace experience. You can't live off of what you might have done. You live with what you actually chose. and his choices, over time, created a life that felt more like performance than purpose. Many people believe they can live safely now and choose meaning later. But life doesn't work like that. Meaning doesn't wait in the background. It fades. Not because it's lost, but because we lose the connection to it. And when time begins to run out, that's when it hits. That's when the things we buried return. Not to punish us, but to remind us what we gave up. And in that moment, all the distractions fall away. The opinions, the comparisons, the external noise, none of it matters when you're facing the end. All that matters is what you did with the time you had. Did you show up for your own life? Did you listen to what made you feel alive? Did you say yes when it counted? Or did you keep telling yourself you'd get around to it someday? Regret doesn't come from taking risks. It comes from playing it so safe that you never even gave yourself the chance to live fully. It comes from silence, from delay, from hesitation. And once time runs out, there's no negotiation, there's no redo, there's only reflection. But here's what's important. If you're reading this, your time hasn't run out. You still have a choice. You still have the ability to turn around, to remember what matters, to make space for the things you've been putting off. Not someday, now, because the only way to escape the weight of regret is to prevent it. That means acting on what feels real to you. It means being honest about what you've been avoiding. It means no longer pretending that you have forever, because you don't. None of us do. And that's what makes this moment powerful, not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. It's a reminder that life isn't something you wait for, it's something you claim. Wallace had chances, many of them, and each time he chose something else, something that made more sense, something that looked better on the outside. But when it was almost over, none of that comforted him. What stayed with him was the image of a door he didn't open, a feeling he didn't follow, a life he didn't live. You don't have to carry that same pain. You can choose differently. You can decide that your peace matters more than your schedule, that your joy matters more than your fear, that your truth matters more than what others expect. Time is limited, but within it is the power to live honestly, to live fully, to live without the kind of regret that hits hardest when time runs out. So don't wait. Don't tell yourself it's not the right moment. This is the moment. The door is still there. The choice is still yours. Open it while you still can. Chapter 9. What happens when you ignore your inner voice? There's a voice inside you that knows. It doesn't speak with fear. It doesn't try to impress. It doesn't yell or rush. It's steady, honest, and quiet. It doesn't argue, it waits. That voice has been with you from the beginning. Before the pressure. Before the world taught you what to chase. Before you were told who you should be, what you should want, and how life is supposed to look. That inner voice doesn't come from outside influence. It's not trying to fit in. It's trying to guide you back to who you really are. But when you keep ignoring it, something inside you starts to shift. Not right away, not all at once, but slowly. Over time, you begin to disconnect. That's what happened to Lionel Wallace. He heard the voice clearly as a child. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. He knew what he saw was real. He knew that door mattered. And the world around him didn't have to explain it. He felt it in his bones. But as he grew, the noise got louder. The responsibilities grew heavier. The expectations multiplied. And instead of listening to the voice that once felt so natural, he began listening to everything else. It starts with small compromises. You tell yourself you'll come back to what matters. You put it off. You convince yourself that it's not the right time, that you need to be practical, that you need to do what makes sense, and you start to tune the voice out. Not because you don't care, but because caring feels risky. Because when you follow that voice, you're often going against the current, and that's hard. It's uncomfortable, it sets you apart. So instead you stay quiet, you keep moving, you push forward, but when you ignore your inner voice for long enough, something breaks. You don't feel as connected to yourself. You go through the motions, but you're not fully present. You might be achieving, but you're not alive in the process. You feel a tension that's hard to describe, an invisible gap between your outer life and your inner truth. The days keep moving, but something feels off, something feels missing, and no amount of success or approval can fill that space. The voice doesn't punish you, it doesn't turn against you, but it grows distant. Not because it's gone, but because you've trained yourself not to hear it. And the longer that distance grows, the harder it becomes to trust yourself. That's the real cost. You start doubting your own feelings. You question your instinct. You look to others to tell you what's right, what's worthy, what's enough. And little by little, you lose the ability to recognize your own truth. Wallace became respected. He was seen as wise, intelligent, accomplished. But inside, he was disconnected. He couldn't escape the feeling that he had stepped away from something that truly mattered. And it wasn't just about the door. It was about the part of him that was brave enough to believe in something beyond what the world could see. The part of him that trusted wonder, trusted silence, trusted the feeling that says, "This is it," even when no one else understands. Ignoring that voice doesn't mean you become a bad person. It means you become a stranger to yourself. You stop feeling deeply. You stop dreaming freely. You stop being moved by what once lit you up, and you replace it all with what's expected, with what earns applause, with what looks right on paper. But life lived that way is exhausting, because no matter how well you perform, you can't shake the feeling that you're not really being you. The inner voice doesn't promise comfort. It doesn't guarantee success. It asks for something more difficult: honesty. It asks you to tell the truth about what you feel, even when it's inconvenient. It asks you to notice the things that bring you peace, the things that excite you, the things that make you feel whole, and to follow them, not just admire them from a distance. Wallace heard that voice again and again. Every time he passed the door, every time he remembered the garden, the stillness, the light, and every time he talked himself out of it. He told himself there would be another chance. He told himself he had more important things to do, and each time that choice moved him further from the part of himself that once believed. Ignoring the inner voice doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you become. You start to adapt, you start to harden, you begin to see the world through the lens of duty instead of meaning, and while that might help you function, it doesn't help you thrive. You wake up one day and realize you've spent years building a life that doesn't reflect what you actually care about. That's a hard truth to face. But it's also a necessary one, because until you face it, you'll keep drifting. You'll keep chasing things that don't satisfy. You'll keep feeling lost, even when you're surrounded by people. You'll keep looking outside yourself for something that can only be found within. The good news is, the voice never truly leaves. It waits. It waits for you to get quiet, to get still, to stop running from what you feel. And when you do, when you finally slow down long enough to listen, you'll recognize it, not because it's loud, but because it's familiar, like an old friend who never stopped believing in you. That moment, when you choose to listen again, is where everything begins to change. You remember what you love. You remember what matters. You remember that you were never meant to live a life that looked perfect, but felt empty. You were meant to live honestly, fully, awake. And that starts with listening. Listening to the voice that doesn't try to convince you, but simply invites you, the one that says, "This is who you are." Don't forget. Wallace remembered too late. He realized near the end, that all the things he thought could replace that voice never could. The recognition, the success, the structure, none of it could fill the space that opened when he stopped trusting himself. And that's what made it hurt. Not because he didn't try hard enough in life, but because he didn't trust what he knew deep down. You don't have to make that same mistake. You don't have to wait until the end to realize what matters. You can choose differently now. You can decide to stop ignoring the part of you that knows. You can stop silencing your own truth just to fit into a version of life that doesn't reflect your heart. That doesn't mean quitting everything. It means tuning in. It means paying attention to what makes you feel alive and giving that part of you space to speak, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's messy, even if it doesn't make sense right away. Because nothing will ever feel as fulfilling as living in alignment with your own truth, and nothing will ever hurt as much as reaching the end of your story and realizing you spent it pretending not to hear what was always there, your own voice, calling you home. Chapter 10. Don't let the door close forever on you. There is a moment in life when the choices you make don't just shape your future, they define whether you keep a door open or let it close forever. That door is more than wood and hinges. It is a symbol of possibility, of hope, of the part of you that still believes in something bigger. It's the door that invites you to step into your true self, your true purpose. But that door isn't going to wait around forever. It won't stay open just because you want it to. The longer you hesitate, the more it risks shutting, quietly but completely. And once it's closed, it's hard to find the key again. Lionel Wallace knew this. From the moment he first saw that green door as a boy, it represented something vital, a space where he could be free, where the world made sense in a way that no one else understood. That door was his chance to hold on to wonder, to connect with what truly mattered beneath the noise. But as the years passed, life pulled him away from it. Responsibilities, fears, the weight of what was expected, each one closing the distance between him and that door, not all at once, but piece by piece. Doors close slowly. Not with a slam, but with a series of small decisions. Each time you ignore the voice inside, each time you push away what moves you, the door moves a little further away. Each time you let fear decide, each time you settle for what's comfortable instead of what's real, the space to be yourself shrinks. You tell yourself the door will be there tomorrow. You say, I'll come back later. But the truth is, later doesn't always come. That door, the one that holds your dreams, your peace, your sense of belonging, is not guaranteed. It's not something you can take for granted. You have to protect it. You have to choose it. You have to walk through it before it closes, because once it does, the life on the other side becomes harder to reach. You start living in a world that's built around safety, not truth, around expectations, not freedom, around what's easy, not what's real. Wallace missed his chances. He hesitated when the door opened, unsure if he could step into what he felt. He convinced himself the world outside was more important. He told himself he had more to do. But that door didn't wait. It faded, not forever, but enough that when he wanted it again, it was distant, almost out of reach, and that's what makes it painful. Not the closing itself, but the feeling that you left something behind, that you can't quite get back. It's easy to think the door only closes for others. We believe there's always time, always space, always opportunity to chase what matters. We tell ourselves life is long, and that the parts of us that dream can wait until we're ready. But readiness is a myth. Life moves fast. The days pass, and one moment turns into the next. If you don't make the choice to step forward, that door quietly shuts. The world around you might celebrate those who follow the expected path. It might reward those who play it safe. But inside, the door to your true life will always be there, or it won't. It depends on the choices you make now. It depends on your willingness to say yes to what's hard, what's uncertain, what's scary, because walking through that door is never easy. It requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires putting yourself first, even when others don't understand. The danger isn't that the door closes once and for all. The danger is that you stop trying to open it, that you become so used to the walls around you that you forget there was ever a way out. You settle into the life that's expected and lose sight of the life that calls to you. You stop listening to the quiet voice that reminds you there's more than this routine. And slowly that voice fades, but the door is still there. It's waiting. Maybe not as bright as it once was, but still waiting. It waits for the day you're brave enough to stand before it and choose, not because the world told you to, but because your heart won't let you live without it anymore. Because you realize that life without that door is a life half-lived. That realization is powerful. It can shake you. It can awaken something deep inside you that's been asleep. It can remind you of the dreams you put on the shelf, the hopes you whispered to yourself when no one was watching, the peace you once felt when everything felt right, and it can push you to act. Choosing to not let the door close forever means facing fear head-on. It means stepping into uncertainty with nothing but your belief in yourself. It means trusting the part of you that knows you deserve more than just going through the motions. It means giving yourself permission to live honestly and fully, even if it feels risky. Wallace's story is a reminder that life is short and fragile, that the moments when the door opens are gifts, that the invitation to step through it is rare, and that the cost of ignoring it is greater than most of us want to admit. But it's also a story of hope, because the door can open again, it can be found, it can be walked through. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have choose. Choose to stop waiting for the right moment. Choose to stop listening to the doubts. Choose to say yes to yourself. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't let life pass by while you stand frozen. That door is your chance to reconnect with what matters, to find peace, to live fully, to be who you were meant to be. And that door is still open today, but it won't stay that way forever. You have the power to keep it open. You have the strength to walk through it. You have the courage to live the life that's waiting for you on the other side. The only question is whether you'll take the step before it closes. Don't let the door close forever on you.